Innovation, imagination, wonder. These are just some of the words used to describe Dr. Harvey Passes. Dr. Passes explores interesting people and ideas that will stimulate you. He questions the people who develop, create, and employ novel concepts in business and everyday lives. He especially loves to speak with successful people. How did they do it? How can you do it too? So let's join Dr. Harvey Passes in his quest of wonder and curiosity as we watch Dr. Harvey Passes Presents.
Have you ever gotten a phone call, and when you get this phone call, you just sit there like this? You're just full of a combination of shock, awe, you're impressed, you just don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. There are very few things in this world that will stop me from talking. And if you've watched the show, you understand that. Well, I got a phone call from a gentleman who you'll meet, and he just made my jaw drop. And frankly, he helped with this other gentleman who you'll meet in a moment to lift a curtain, a veil of secrecy, a topic full of taboo that's been in my family for 75 years. You're going to hear about this because this is a phenomenal human interest story. Sit down, relax. You're about to watch something that will intrigue and interest you. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to two fabulous human beings who've pulled the curtain up. First, Stan Friedland. Stan, great to see you again.
Harvey, a pleasure is mine.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. And let me just tell the folks at home a little bit about who Stan is. Stan is a member of the executive board of the Alumni Association, the alumni chapter of the Pride of Judea Children's Home, which you're going to learn a lot about today. You're also a former assistant principal?
Former high school principal.
Former high school principal, I'm sorry.
15 years worth of high school principaling here on Long Island.
On Long Island, what town?
Bayport, Blue Point.
Okay, I know what that is. Absolutely. Okay, so, okay, you've been around. Okay. And the other gentleman who you have to meet as well is David Prever. David, thank you very much for taking the time to come down.
Also my pleasure, Dr.
You're just wonderful, wonderful, terrific, all that you've done. Let me tell you a little bit about who David is. David's a very interesting fellow as well, not only being a New York City school teacher and a member of the Alumni Association of the Pride of Judea, but this gentleman is also a gifted, talented genealogist, an individual who digs up and finds out about the history of people and their families. Well, you're going to learn more about this later on. Just fantastic. You'll see what they've done. So here's what happened before we start getting into a dialogue. I get a phone call from Stan, and basically what happened was this. He starts telling me about what happened to my uncle. And he's talking, and I go, wow, wait a minute, slow down. He's saying things that I haven't even a clue as to what he's talking about. Here's a little bit of history. My father grew up during the Depression, and he was one of 7 brothers. And unfortunately for my dad, when he was about 7, his mother died. And my grandfather, during the Depression, couldn't raise 7 boys. It was just too difficult. So the 2 oldest were sent out to work, and then the next 4 were put in one orphanage to be raised, and the youngest 2 were put into a children's home called the Pride of Judea, which in those days, that was considered the gem of all of those kind of institutions. And my 2 youngest uncles, my Uncle Joe and my Uncle Asher, were there, and Asher was the youngest. Now, what happened was that I was told that my Uncle Asher had died, and he died in a drowning accident when he was 13. And that was it. Whenever I would ask my dad about it or speak to anyone else in the family, the subject was changed or nobody spoke about it, nothing at all. Even my father's brothers, my uncles, nobody discussed it. And I couldn't understand, so I kind of tucked it away until I spoke with Stan Friedland. He starts explaining to me about something that happened 75 years ago, and that there was an outing. And, well, you're going to hear about this in a moment when you see what happened. 75 years ago, this past Friday, on August 8th, at the Pride of Judea building in Douglaston, New York on Northern Boulevard, there was a 75th anniversary commemoration of this unbelievable event that happened, that took the lives of 7 children, and my uncle being one of them. I was there, my family was there, and we got a chance to learn and to see, and just shocked and awe by what happened. I want you to watch this roll-in piece, then we'll have our conversation. Was this a good lead up into it?
Excellent.
Okay, okay. Let's roll that that tape, and please listen to this. This is an amazing thing.
This is a commemoration of an event that took place on this day at 2 p.m. 75 years ago.
We're gathered here this morning to honor and memorialize 7 of our Pride of Judea home brothers who 75 years ago to this date, August 8, 1933, were swept away in a sudden tidal surge while they were in the midst of a gleeful beach outing. That outing to the beach at Edgemere in the Rockaways was planned so that everyone could have a day away from the institution where they resided. The motivation on the part of the staff was commendable but flawed, in that there were no water safety personnel on staff, and 1 male and 5 females attending the trip were in street clothing. However, I am sure they safely assumed that the lifeguards at the beach afforded more than adequate protection for any 1 or 2 children that might get in trouble in the water. We later learned that the lifeguards also had their assumptions, as they saw about 100 children enter the beach in one large group. They assumed that there were adult water safety personnel on staff, so that the burden of what suddenly occurred would not fall on them alone. They were not informed that such a group of children would come to their beach, and no one could have foreseen what would all too quickly occur when about 40 children formed a line and snake danced out to what seemed a safe sandbar about 40 yards offshore. A sudden and overwhelming tidal movement of water came as a wave which swept over those 40 young children, all between the ages of 10 and 14, most of whom were not swimmers of any significant skill, if any at all. The children were still cavorting on that sandbar about 40 feet from shore, despite a lifeguard in a boat in the channel behind it, shouting for them to go back. He could not be heard in the din of joyful children's voices behind that sandbar. And behind the sandbar was a deep eddying channel, and the wave and resultant undertow swept all of the children out into very deep water, where they floundered screaming for help. The lifeguard staff, made up of swim team and water polo team players from local colleges such as City College and Brooklyn College, valiantly sprang into action, but were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of children grabbing at them in panic. Their own strength declining, they repeatedly boated and swam out to grab as many as they could and bring them to shore. The unidentified male staff member from the Pride removed his outer clothing at the beach and swam out to help as well. It was described by one onlooker as being like the aftermath of a shipwreck in which the survivors were all in the water in panic, fighting for their lives. I was born 3 years after this event, and when I was in the home at about age 11, I did come to hear about it from another child in the home, and I remember distinctly my sudden fear in thinking about that happening to other children and whether such a fate would happen to me, as we all used to go to Long Beach for the summer. I also remember asking him how such a thing could occur. How could it be that so many were lost at one time? It seemed at first that he was making it up to frighten me. Alas, we know now how it happened. He was remarkably knowledgeable about it, given his young age, and I don't remember the person. And I did think to ask him how he came to know about it, and he replied, "I just heard." I am sure we can all identify with the terror those children felt as they flailed about helplessly. Sadly, 7 boys were lost in that tragedy. I felt that I had to be here today somehow, notwithstanding that I didn't know those boys personally. However, they are our brothers who preceded us at the home. Perhaps in some way, their deaths ensured that we went to the beach years later at Long Beach, and there were always water safety personnel on duty to watch over us. as well as safety procedures like buddy calls, safety lines, or human barriers of older children given the task of making sure that the younger children didn't go out too far. In addition, we were all given swimming lessons at the municipal pool.
First of all, good morning to everybody, and thank you very much for being here. I want to start with in part, a letter that I received on June 20th, 2008. Hi, David. I need to call on your genealogical expertise once again as part of a Pride of Judea alumni project that we're doing. The enclosed materials will provide the necessary information, but let me fill you in as well. On August 8, 1933, at a beach outing, many Pride kids were swept off the sandbar in Rockaway, and 7 were drowned. We're commemorating the 75th anniversary of this tragedy with a memorial plaque with their names to be hung in the Pride building next to our memorial plaque. Then I'll skip, and it says, I need you to read the materials, especially the identities of the victims and any mention of their siblings, who are the ones I'd like you to locate. In advance, many thanks, Stan. This is the letter that I received from Stan starting this all. I wanted to start by thanking the Passes family especially for not having a name like Cone or Katz. A lot easier. How can I begin? I have a lot of thanks to give. I have to give thanks to Jay Ivler, who's the president of Mount Lebanon Cemetery, where all the victims are buried. He was able, with the boundaries only your uncles.
Asher's family. If there is a heaven, he is smiling at this very moment. So again, we thank you for coming, and we're pleased to be here with you.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's kind of tough for me to follow that up, but the show must go on, as we say. Well, so now I know what happened to my Uncle Asher, and I can't thank you enough for instituting, executing, and concluding this, because now my family, after the program on Friday commemorating this event, my family all went out for a bite, and we spoke. And my aunt Violet, who is married to Joe, and Joe was in the Pride of Judea Children's Home with Asher. They were the two youngest rather, and she was telling me that she knew all about this, and she just never said anything because she thought everybody else knew about it. It's amazing. And she proceeds to explain the whole event, and that Joe and Asher were holding hands together on the beach, and when the wave hit, Joe was trying to save Asher, and he just saw the hand let go, and the next thing Joe knew, he woke up in the hospital, and next to a bunch of other boys. And when he woke up, he knew that Asher had died. He grabbed the newspaper, and the newspaper, because this made headlines for a week, from what I understand, from what you've shown me, and he saw in the newspaper, and he read his brother's name as one of the victims. And Uncle Joe never said anything about this. Unfortunately, Uncle Joe and all the rest of the brothers have all been deceased now, as years have gone by. But this has been a topic never ever to be discussed. So let's go back for a moment and talk about the Pride of Judea. How did the Pride of Judea Children's Home get started?
Harvey, in the early part of the 20th century, many Jewish families who had immigrated here had a large number of youngsters they could not support. So they started farming them out to various places. A group of men led by a great philanthropist by the name of Max Blumberg decided that a small Jewish orphanage, in comparison to the many large ones around, would be appropriate. So they raised some money. They built a lovely facility in the East New York section of Brooklyn. And in 1923, this orphanage opened with a capacity of no more than 250, and generally speaking, it operated about 200 youngsters. Generally speaking, they were known for ideal care, personalized care, no corporal punishment. They had an excellent reputation, which was well deserved, except for this tragedy in 1933. One of our oldest living alumni, who is now 94 years old, a lovely lady by the name of Martha Snyder Miller.
Right, who I'd spoken with on the phone.
Was not at the beach that day, but she was so traumatized by this that she has invariably kept the memory of these 7 boys alive. So as we approach the 75th anniversary on August the 8th, 2008, it was Martha who said, we must do something, we must commemorate their memory and keep their memory alive.
I didn't realize it was Martha who instituted this. Oh, I see. Now, what exactly did you do? So you got this letter from Stan saying, help us, help us. I'm not a genealogist. I can guess, but how do you go about finding this out? And yet you thank my family for having the name Passes and not Katz or Cohen. Why?
Well, if there was a name like Cohn, it
Right.
would have been almost impossible.
Too many.
Because Cohn is a very common name. A name like Friedland is not that common. A name like Prever is definitely not that common. And a name like Passes, there are not many Passes. The name, if you look in a phone book, you're not going to find too many.
No.
And the chances, actually, I'll tell you one quick anecdote.
Sure.
In going into one of the databases that I went into, it's Ancestry.com. I went and I put in the name, the last name Passes, and I even came up with a Native American by the name of Beaver that Passes. So I knew
Really?
that, yes, so I knew that that was not a Jewish Passes.
Right.
But I did find plenty of Passes, and I just, used some of the sources that are available. And there was, of course, the Passes name and 6 other families that I had to try to find for the memorial. So it's just a matter of sleuth work, a matter of perseverance, a matter of knowing the databases to look at, look at the sources that are public record, and it's just a matter of luck. I actually, none of the 7 names are very common names,
Right.
except
read
for
them off
Feldman.
later.
Yes,
Right.
except for Feldman.
And David found one of the survivors.
Let's talk about that. It was one of the survivors. And
A youngster, one of the victims was a young man by the name of Benjamin Hauptmann. And he also had a brother, Seymour Hauptmann, who was one of the 40. And he went into the ocean along with Benjamin and had pretty much the same experience of holding his brother's hand only to have it slip away. And David helped us discover Seymour Hauptmann living in Florida, living in New Jersey as a snowbird, age 87. I was able to call Seymour. He was overcome with emotion. He was going in for surgery the next day to have a leg amputated because he was a diabetic. And he said, I'll come to that commemoration whether I have to come by ambulance or not. And I said, Seymour, I'll look in on you in a week or 2. Regrettably, when I looked in on Seymour, his family was sitting shiver.
Oh.
He had passed away just days before from a heart attack, the last living survivor of that tragedy.
Oh, God. Unbelievable. It's tough for me to do this show, but I'll continue with it. What I'd like to do is, well, before I do that, as I mention the names, you just surprised me with all of your sleuth work, or is it sleuthing? But you surprised me when you showed me a photo, and we saw it earlier on the piece, of my Uncle Asher's gravesite. I did not even know where he was buried. I didn't have a clue. And yet you stood there and you photographed it, correct?
Yes.
Right. So
All 7 grave sites he did.
So at some point when the show is over, you'll give me information, because certainly I'd like to go down there with my family as well and see this, which is just an amazing thing. Let's come back to the event of that day so that my viewer watching understands the significance of this. In one what do they say? One fell swoop, 7 boys died and countless others were just, they were survivors, but they went through this horrific ordeal. What did the city, what did New York do about this? What did the newspapers do?
This made the front page of the New York Times, August 9th, 1933, in blazing large type headlines. Wave, surge, throws 40 youngsters into the ocean, 7 are lost. The first day, only 1 youngster's body was brought out, that of Raymond Evans. 6 bodies were washed away. The currents are so strong there that they were washed away and not found until 3 days later. It made the headlines. Obviously, there's culpability on the part of the Pride. It was their lowest moment, despite the fact there was a wonderful orphanage for its 39-year life. And some of the lifeguards were culpable, but they were heroic in the main. The Pride was culpable. There was talk of indicting them. There was a DA investigation. It was thoroughly investigated so that the story pursued itself and remained alive for 5 full days until the DA finally said, we would rather not prosecute. And the story died out. However, the tragedy was as uppermost in the minds of those who were there. As you may remember, on last Friday, we had a person who was close to 90,
right,
in the person of Morris Teddy Carroll, whose wife is a psychotherapist. And he cannot talk of that day. His wife, if you recall, got up to say he has been traumatized. His memory has been repressed, suppressed. He can not remember anything because he needs some hypnosis. That's how severe the tragedy was for those who survived it.
I have so many questions to ask you about this, and yet because of the emotion about this, I get caught up in listening and not going on with the questions. Actually, I did forget. What I want to do is mention the names of the boys who did not make it. You had Leon Schachter, Raymond Evans, Robert Rothstein, William Feldman, Meyer Potaskin, Benjamin Hauptmann, and my uncle Asher Passes. From what I understand is that the Pride, the chaperones, bringing down 100 children, I believe, for this outing, neglected to ask the lifeguards where is a safe place to go on the beach.
That is correct.
And the lifeguards, figuring such a large group of people, they must be responsible enough to make sure that they have these children supervised effectively, and they did not in turn go over to the group to say, listen, are you okay? Do you know? And are you aware? No one did any of this stuff.
The lifeguards interviewed afterwards said, we never would have put the youngsters or allowed them to be placed in the water there. It's one of the most dangerous spots on the beach.
And still is.
And still is today, because as you know, just 3 weeks ago,
say it.
7 people lost their lives in drowning incidents on the south shore of Long Island,
right,
but 2 to 3 weeks ago. It is still a very difficult area to swim in, and it should be said, tread softly, tread carefully in this water. 100 kids came down on the beach. They snake danced their way out to a sandbar. 40 kids were happy that 33 were saved. We're fortunate that 33 were saved. Regrettably, 7 were not, one of them being your Uncle Asher.
Right, right. What lasting tributes did the Pride of Judea do that was inaugurated and executed this past Friday on August 8th? To remember.
Our alumni chapter is a very vibrant one, a very responsible one. We felt that their lives, their names need a rebirth, and we brought them to life. That's what commemoration means. We want to, in effect, honor their memory in as lifelike a manner as we did. And we brought them to life for you. We took away the curtain of secrecy for, we hoped would be 7 families. Thanks to David, we did get 2 families, and obviously we had a great outpouring from your family, and we're glad for that. But we brought their memories back to life for at least the day. We have a very wonderful plaque and the story of their tragedy placed on the wall of the community service room of the Prever Community Services Division in Douglaston. And we also have a plaque honoring Martha Snyder Miller for inspiring us to keep their memories alive.
What I'd like to do right now is ask my crew to put up on the screen. There's a graphic, and people want to call and learn more about the Pride of Judea. Is it Mental Health Division?
It's a Community Services Division. They are one of the best mental health centers in the New York tri-state area. Take it from me, because this has been one of my areas.
Right.
They do a remarkable job. They serve everyone interracially, ethnically. They are, if you cannot afford them, they will work with you. They're just an excellent clinic center staffed by professional people.
And this is in Douglaston on Northern Boulevard, I think 243rd Street.
Right,
and
east of Douglaston Parkway.
Right, on Northern Boulevard. A big building, three stories. I was very surprised. First, I also want to thank Paul Hirsch.
Paul Hirsch is our newsletter editor. He also was part of the inspirational group. You saw Dr. Manny Feinberg on tape give that inspirational set of comments.
Thank you. I didn't want his name to go unnoticed for what he did, as well as the both of you were on there. Again, I can't thank the Pride of Judea Alumni Association and you gentlemen and all the other people whose names we mentioned enough. I'll speak for myself and the rest of my Passes family for what you've done to help us see and understand and become enlightened. And it's more than just getting the information. It's more than just hearing this, because so many other things all of a sudden fit into place for us. That's something that needs to be understood, because my father and his brothers did not discuss it. And now we understand why. They've always been quiet about things. Things have been difficult and tough for them. They've had a rough life. But we understand it now.
And when you take that picture that we saw of Asher and Joseph hugging each other prior to this ugly tragedy, you could see in Asher's face the face of a vibrant, lively, bright, with it type of young person who had the future in his palms. That's what makes this tragedy so compelling and so sad 75 years later.
And I think everything just brought everything more to life for your family. It would have been, again, it would have been nice to have 7 families all together, but just for your family, I think it brought everything, how can I say it, more than three-dimensional, if I can say that.
That's true. That's true. The fourth dimension is the emotion, I guess. And because of this, my family is meeting in about a month from now to discuss all of this, and people are going to fly in and drive in and everything else to go over this, discuss it, and see this show as well.
And as you may remember, Harvey, we had an 11-minute audio tape from Martha Snyder Miller.
Right.
She's 94. She lived this tragedy by being 18 years old at the time and a young supervisor at the Pride. And the last question we posed to her is, Martha, what does this do for you? She said, after years of pain, this provides me with some closure.
Yes, and I can agree with that, not having had all the years of pain, but it gives me closure on the silence to understand why. We're out of time. We're out of time. And I thank the both of you very much. David Prever, genealogist extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Stan Friedland, human being extraordinaire.
Thank you, Harvey.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for all of us, and especially all the other names. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about my family and this unbelievable, colossal experience, and very emotional to say the least. So I want to thank you very much, and just like these two gentlemen, whatever you do it with passion. Otherwise, what's the use? Until next time, Dr. Pass is saying so long for now. David? Thanks, Stan.